Welcome to this webinar titled Driving Organizational Performance, Leveraging the Untapped Benefits of Development Center. Thank you for joining us on the webinar today. We all say this, and it's also been proven that the success of an organization is directly related to the competence of the people and also the leadership of the organization. But we are also in a business environment that is volatile, that is uncertain, that is always changing, which require that business strategies, also need to keep up with this, the pace, needs to be changing from time to time, and organizations need to develop new business models to survive. But in the midst of this also is the key responsibility of the HR function to ensure that the organizations have the right people, the competent people to be able to drive the strategy. Otherwise, it is the strategy is dead on arrival. But competence is something that cannot be assumed. And so the question is, what must be the employees be competent? They must be competent at what? So in this webinar today, we are going to be providing some answer to these questions as we try to achieve the following objectives. One is to be able to establish a link between organizational competence, the competence of the people, and the productivity of the organization. Then two, it's for us to be able to look at the role that Development Center plays in the development of these competencies, and we will also look at how you as an organization, that you can identify the core competencies your organization must develop to be able to win in the marketplace. All right. This webinar is brought to you by Assessment are Us, which is the business arm of Workforce Group, a business and HR consulting firm that is responsible for everything that has to do with assessment, ensuring that organizations bring in the right people, using different methodologies and tools, and also to continue to ensure that even when they are in the organization, they continue to be the relevant people to drive the business of the organization. So I'm joined today by my panelists. The first of which is Olanike Martins, the head of HR business partner from Sterling Bank. She will be giving us insight into our experience with using Development Center to drive the development of competence in organization. And she's done it for over 10 years now, and I believe that we are going to learn a lot from her. And also in the panel is Folusho Aribisala, the CEO of Workforce Group. And he's also going to help us to establish the connection between the competence of the employees and the productivity of organization amidst other things that will be talked about today. My name is Akindele Afolabi. I am the director of Assessment are Us, a member of Workforce Group, and I will be moderating this webinar. So we were going to structure this webinar in this following outline. First, we try to make a case for the link between employee competence and business performance, why your organization should focus now on capacity development. Then we will go on to look at the role Development Center plays in this employee competence development, and also give some insight into how to identify the competencies that are required to win in your marketplace, how to know them, and how to start building them. Then at the end of it all, we would try to provide the benefits of Development Center, looking at it from the perspective of a user. All right. Then also we'll take questions and answer as time permits. And I want to encourage you to stay with us on this webinar till the end, because we have some offers for you that we believe would help you to put into use some of the things that you would learn in this webinar. So to jump in straight, I would like to call on Folisho Haribisala to start with us on this webinar.
Thank you very much, Aki. I'm delighted to be here. And thank you for our attendees as well. We're always delighted to have you attend our webinars. I know you might have questions and comments as we go along. Please feel free to use the chat box and note some of your questions down for the question and answer session at the end of the webinar. So my task is a bit easier than everybody else, is to establish the connection between corporate performance and employee competence. So just to get to arrive at that point, we need to step back a bit to a few years and to look at the trends. Now, if you're observant, you notice that the world of business has been changing rapidly, particularly more over the last few months. And the basis for competition and competitive advantage and winning in the past have changed significantly. We can say that with the era of what we call knowledge workers, whereby the ability to leverage human talent, innovation, creativity has become a critical competitive advantage for organizations. Incidentally, even though Peter Drucker died in 2005, his ability to see into the future and predict things that will determine success and failure of corporate organizations didn't cease. I think as early as 1959, Peter Drucker had been informing the world and raising the awareness about the era of the knowledge workers, where the basis of competition will shift from traditional tangible assets to human resource and the ability to make decisions and drive business processes. Now, just to put, shed a bit more light on this and put some facts behind that theory. If you look at the screen, I have put in how what you call the S&P 500 companies, that's the top 500 companies in the United States, distributed their resources on productive assets. As early as 1975, you will see that all the big players then, which are the dominant players, the IBMs, ExxonMobil, Procter & Gamble, GE, and 3M, which are the leading companies there, they're primarily focused in terms of how do we the bulk of their resources on tangible assets. If you look at this, they had over $715 billion in assets, and the bulk of it, almost $600 million, was primarily in tangible assets. Now, if you jump forward into 2018, the rule has changed completely. Companies have recognized that the value of talent in winning in today's marketplace cannot be underestimated. So if you look at the biggest companies now, the Apples, the Alphabets, the Microsoft, Amazon, and Facebook, and they're also some of the most profitable organizations, what they have in common is the awareness and the investment in intangible assets powered by human creativity and innovation. So you can, if you look at the table, you can see that from about 1995, the awareness had hit the workplace, and there has been a continuous deliberate shift in ensuring that companies were able to identify the right talents, equip them, and prepare them to win now and in the future. So let's go further and look at all the collaborating evidence that draws a clear line of sight between the capability of the workforce and organizational productivity. Now, why this is important is that if you speak with most or a few HR people, their biggest challenge is the ability to convince the executives to invest in certain HR initiatives because the line of sight isn't really clear. That how can you prove to me that investment in this will translate to better business results? Now, every executive is interested in the business doing better. That's really how they're rewarded and what assures their own success. But as HR practitioners, we need to go a bit further to draw that line of sight and convince them that the ability to invest in a productive and capable workforce clearly drives business results. So similar challenge raised was the reason for a recent study in United Kingdom where they tried to find the link between skilled workforce and corporate performance. So the research found that workers with higher skill levels were able to support innovation, were able to adapt better, and also were able to involve in more sophisticated production processes, which was associated with production of higher quality products and services. In short, they found out that more productive companies hired more skilled workers, and there was a clear connection between the skill level and the level of productivity or performance of the organization. Now, on the reverse, where they found out that the difference between the top performing companies and the bottom performing companies, that 8% of that was the product skill gap. Now, there were other factors that accounted to the difference, but 8% of that factor was attributed to the skill gap between the set of workers in those two sets of organizations. Now, another research also conducted in the United Kingdom highlighted the link between highly skilled workers to such corporate benefits as being able to survive in turbulent and difficult business times, better commercial orientation, better strategic awareness, and the propensity to innovate to retain the company's strategic competitive advantage. So now, of recent, Google also conducted a search across to determine what was the common trend with the most innovative and productive groups within the company. Their finding was shocking. They found out that the best teams weren't the ones with top scientists. Instead, their highest performing teams were interdependent groups with with employees that had strong soft skills that made it easier for them to collaborate in the value production process. So it's easy for us to draw a simple hypothesis underlining the impact of employees on corporate performance. And this will be the three simple things that all the data that we've looked at has pointed to. One, organizational performance improves if core individual competencies are enhanced, particularly their soft skills. Two, organizational performance improves if managerial competencies are enhanced. That's the ability of managers to coordinate, provide direction, develop, provide feedback to the rest of the workforce. And three, organizational performance improves if functional or what we call technical competencies are also enhanced across the various roles. So with this in mind, it would be nice to get some feedback from the audience and to bring the audience in. Now, using your chat box, I would like us to identify the top 3 competencies required to win your own specific industries. So you can just pop into your chat box and let's get your feedback about that. I'll try and read through and see some of the feedback that we have coming in. Okay, Akin, you can also help with that.
Yeah.
So are there certain trends that we're seeing?
Okay, so they are coming in gradually, and I think one that has been stated here is innovation and digitalization, which seems to be very common. Many people are saying that. Creative thinking also is another one that is very common. I also have here digital savvy, which will probably mean another thing with digitalization. Okay, so we have innovation, emotional intelligence. All right. Again, we have tech savvy. I want to believe that all that is also in line with digitization, with digital transformation, as people are using different words. Okay, we have a business acumen, design thinking. All these are coming prominently in what people are saying.
Okay, interesting. Where there's a bit of variety, certain things seem to be coming over and over again.
Yeah.
You can see the digital trend, you can see the innovation, you can see creativity coming in repeatedly as well. Okay, thank you very much for the feedback. Now, interestingly, let's see how much this has changed over the last few years. So please launch the first poll. We would like to get your feedback and compare the feedback. So have these competencies you listed changed over the last 2 years? If you were able to go back and look at your business and what it took to win 2 years ago, would this have been the competencies you will have stated? So please answer us. Either some have changed, all have changed, or none have changed at all. It'd be nice to see how quickly the business terrain has transformed over the last 24 months from the perspective of the audience.
Okay. So let's keep it coming. We have a few seconds to the end of the poll.
Okay. Very interesting. None have changed. Interesting. Okay, I think we can end the poll and share the results now. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the result. 77% of the respondents agree that some of these competencies have changed over the last 2 years. 15% say that all have changed, while just about 8% said none, has changed. I mean, it would be interesting to know the background of those organizations where none has changed, so that we can know probably if they have already migrated or not. So, I mean, this also goes to show what we have been saying, over the last 2 years, from what Felicia had already taken us through, moving from tangible to intangible asset, which is what has accounted for the productivity of most organizations. And we see that the top organizations that were on board some years ago are nowhere to be found, with respect to this. So I'll let Felicia take it over from here.
Okay, thank you very much, Aki. Before we take the poll numbers away, let's just reflect on it a bit and what this means for organizations and HR practitioners. So what we're really saying is that 77% of the audience, which I think is reflective of the reality of most businesses, the basis of competition and success 2 years ago are not exactly the same thing, meaning that some of the employees that were top performers, that were productive, that were helping companies win at that point in time, suddenly are not creating the same level of value, not due to their own failure, but because the business environment has changed rapidly. Now, then 15% of the audience says that all has changed, meaning that they had to transform their businesses completely. Either you have to get in a new set of talent, or you have to have programs to quickly reskill and train. Now, so if we agree that staff competence is linked to corporate success, and we agree that the required competencies are also changing rapidly, it means that companies must have a way to identify the required competencies. They must have a process of revalidating those competencies. They must be able to also attract and validate that new employees have competencies today and for the future, and also be able to reskill and upskill very quickly to meet the needs of the marketplace. Thank you very much. So now, can you take away the poll? Yeah. So the correlation between employee competence and business performance is quite clear. And that's why either in the public sector or private sector, human assets are becoming critical resource. And there is now what they call the war for talent, where companies are recognizing that they need to hire right and they need to have a plan to develop their people. Now, another survey conducted a bit earlier in 2017 tried to identify what is the possible impact if you don't have the right skill set within the organization. How does it affect your organization? Now, many of the things that companies struggle with is really a symptom of having people that are not skilled at the right level to help translate the business goals into reality. So if you look at this, that evaluates, I think, 2015 and 2017, the blue bar is the 2017 survey, showing the impact of poorly skilled staff on corporate performance and productivity. You can see that the biggest impact is increased workload to other staff. So because you have a few staff that are capable, you tend to burn them out, and they are not as productive as they are because a few of the workforce is carrying the bulk of the of the productivity and output. And this is common with many organizations. That seems to be having one of the biggest concerns. Then high operating costs because of error rates, mistakes that the employees would, and they were not able to adopt the best technology or the best processes. Difficulty meeting quality standards, difficulty introducing new work practices as well. We see a lot of companies struggling to go digital because the existing workforce really don't have the base knowledge for them to operate in the digital workplace. Then loss of business or orders to competitors, delay in delivering new products and services to the market, which is the ability to adapt and respond to changing market needs. Then in certain instances, they've had to outsource the work completely because they recognize that they didn't have the skill set internally to respond to those new competitive required competencies. And some businesses say no impact at all, which is similar to companies that have said that there hasn't been a change in terms of, so you will see a few companies that will fall in that gap. Now, with all this, it's most shocking that a recent survey by Gardner found out that only 9% of chief human resource officers agree that the organization is prepared for the future of work. That they're really still in the dark. So over 91% of those companies are really still in the dark. As a result of this, many of those companies identified their top priorities for 2020 was this to drive business growth. One, which was the number one priority, was ensuring the workforce has the competence it needs for the future. Two, equipping leaders for success with to deal with the expanding business demands. Three, was making work easier through organizational design and change management. Four, was closing the talent gap to drive digital business transformation, which came up from a lot of the feedback we got from the audience as well. And five was achieving higher returns from investing in employee experience, which is quite interesting. The last few decades has really been about customer experience as being the key driver for business growth and sustainability. Now, there is now a lot of talk about employee experience as well, in terms of being able to boost employee productivity by offering the right level of experience that attracts the right employee, drives ownership and buy-in, and also ensures that your workforce is firing on all cylinders. So let's launch the second poll just to get some feedback as to where the audience is in respect to some of these indicators. Okay, sorry, me poll two. I'll just okay. So Akin, can you help with the polls?
Okay, so this second poll is about how effective are your people development practices in driving business growth and innovation. And by effectiveness, we mean you see how it promotes revenue generation, developing future leaders, building the competencies the organization needs to survive. So we have three options there: very effective, less effective, and not effective. So please, let's put in responses now. How effective are your people development practices in driving business growth and innovation? Okay, interesting. All right, we will end the poll in about 3 seconds.
Interestingly, I think some of the feedback we've gotten from similar webinars, even across the learning and development business line, is that the learning and development and people development budget is one of the budgets that have been most impacted by the economic recession. So that might also erode the effectiveness of existing programs.
Yeah. Okay. So Felicia, please go on.
Okay. So interesting feedback. So for the bulk of the audience, 64%, almost two-thirds, have stated that it's still very effective, meaning that they must have adapted and realigned based on the current business needs. Others might still need a bit more adaptation, but we've also found out that with companies that the industries have resulted in rapid transformation also struggle a bit, because now being able to transit to the old practices and the development systems to and to those that will support new skill sets might take a bit more time and a bit more effort. Okay, thank you very much. So we can take this away. I will hand over to Akin to come in and share some in terms of the role that the development center plays in employee development. I found out that too often when we talk about assessment, people are always thinking about, oh, hiring new staff. But sometimes, in fact, most often, we overlook the tool as being able to even identify and build capability of existing staff. Yes, it helps to validate and identify that the quality of your new hires. But beyond that, and even maybe even more importantly, is in terms of being able to validate that your existing staff have the required skill sets to help drive your business success. Too often I've seen that companies focus on the quantity of the human resource. But in the knowledge era, I think quality is a lot more important, and quantity is never an acceptable substitute when it comes to the quality of talent. So thank you very much, Akin.
All right, Felicia, thank you very much. Okay, so Felicia has established the connection between capacity development and the productivity of the organization. And like you said, most times organizations think when it comes to using assessment, it's only for recruitment, which is not true. And that's why for most times, the performance management system, it's normally built around the capability of the employee for the job that they are doing. From my experience over the years, we find out that most times when people are promoted based only on the outcome of their performance appraisal alone, it's also, it usually come out that some of them get to the new role and they are not able to perform effectively. This is because, yes, they have done well on their current job, but what is required for the next level of job, the competencies that are required are totally different. For an individual who has been managing a team of 2 people and is promoted to a role where he has to manage maybe about 3 teams, it will be a different competence that is required. So this is where development center comes in, especially with what we are discussing in this webinar. One of the things about development center is it's actually focused on the business needs. All right, and it's not just on the immediate, because it also looks further into the future and asking the questions, what competencies will be required by the organization and how can we start developing for this. Now, the best way to talk about this, the role of development center, is to use some case studies. And so I'm just going to share from one or two of the projects that we have worked on before. So we had this client, a commercial bank, and they came up with this role called Sonar Operation Service Manager. And this is very critical to them because reports have gone out that they are not customer friendly, that they have a lot to do with respect to customer services and all that. So they came up with that role, which was totally new to them. And so Workforce was engaged to work with them on this role. And one of the first things we did was to establish the critical success factor, okay, for the project. What would success look like at the end of the evaluation of the staff that have been put forward for the role. And after that, we now designed a development center, which was tailored to the success profile that was created for the role of the Sonar Operation Service Manager. And by success profile, I mean the competencies that are required for anyone that will be on that role to be able to succeed, and also to meet the needs of the bank, to be able to address some of their concerns that made them create that role. And so we got our certified assessors. We developed multiple exercises, including role play. I mean, you would agree with me that for a role like a zonal operations service manager, it's the interaction, you will have a lot of interaction with customers. So we try to simulate most of those interactions in different assessment exercises. And at the end of the day, we were clear, and the bank too was clear with the people that have the requisite competencies, and to the extent, you know, which they have it, that's the proficiency level, which also give room for them to start some developmental interventions to be able to close the gap. Then again, for others who ordinarily had thought that by the function that they were carrying out in the bank, they were fit for the role, it was clear that there were gaps. And so this also helped to prevent agitations from the employees that, yes, they were entitled to the role, because you can see clearly the gaps based on the competencies that are required for the success. At the end of the day, this was, the development center was further validated in about, I mean, in months, you know, into the roles when the right candidate that we placed and the developmental institution, I mean, interventions put in place. We, working with the bank, we were able to see the performance of those guys on the job. All right, so that's a case study from the banking sector. This is not only applicable to the banking sector. Another project we have worked on, it's similar to this, but it's in a multinational FMCG, where they have their finance director who had been on the role for years, all right, and has to go on retirement. And so it's a type of business where they have operational centers across different locations in Nigeria. So in each of these operation centers, they have like finance managers responsible for the operations in those locations. So these were like the natural people that should move up to the new role. But it was important for the business to reevaluate first the role of the finance director vis-a-vis, you know, things that have changed over time. You remember I said the financial director has been on that role for them. So there is every tendency that things were still being done the way he started the job. So Workforce was brought in to develop a finance manager effectiveness assessment to take all the finance managers in the different locations that were being selected as potential candidate for the role. So what we did was to engage with the organization, the subject matter experts, the management team to understand their vision, you know, for the business and what the key deliverables of the finance directors are with respect to the challenges that they are facing. And so we came up with assessment instruments that help to identify each of those managers that have the behavioral indicators of the competencies that we came up with as needed for the job. We went as far as benchmarking some of their competitors that are doing well on that role to see what their finance directors are doing, what types of competencies do they demonstrate, how are they able to help their organization to be successful. So this went into the development of the various exercises and the instruments that were used. So at the end of the day too, when all the finance managers were taken through the assessment, it was clear where each of them stands. And one other thing that also was came up during the exercise was the organization were able to see why they have some gaps, okay, in all those business locations as a result of the performance of the finance director. So from this assessment, we suggested capacity development initiatives beyond training, which those guys were meant to go through. And at the end of the day, too, they selected the right candidates. The gaps were clear. And so they were able to focus on closing those gaps with respect to what are the key deliverables of the finance directors. So the ability to be able to look ahead of the current moment to develop competencies that will be needed in the future, and also to address some of the agitations that you would normally have in organization when people believe that they are entitled to a particular role. Taking them through the finance manager effectiveness really show them that their shortcomings, and so there were less agitations, there were less complaints about people that I deserve this role and all that. Everybody just took the outcome of the process and spent time developing themselves. So we can see now how critical developer center is in helping organizations to develop their competencies. But the question now is, how do you identify the competencies that are required to win in your marketplace? I said earlier that competencies can never be assumed. It's not enough to sit down within the organization and be asking maybe line managers, or you do your job analysis, and at the end of the day, you come up and say, okay, these are the competencies. Based on our experience working with organizations over the years, there are certain guidelines that we would like to share with you that can help you to understand what are the competencies you should focus on, so that you can also manage your budget driving those competencies. But before we go into that, I would like us to quickly take a poll. Yeah. So now this next poll is, the question is, I certainly know the competencies that should be driving my business now and in the near future. So the options we have is to a large extent, to some extent, and not yet certain. The question again is, I certainly know the competencies that should be driving my business now and in the near future. And our options are to a large extent, to some extent, and not yet certain. Okay, interesting result coming up here. All right, we have a few seconds to go to the end. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. Thank you. Okay, so I believe this also is representative of what we have been getting over the years working with clients. So 27% of the respondents says that to a large extent, they know the competencies that should be driving their business now and in the future. Interestingly, 73% say to some extent. So that means that there is a bit of unclarity with respect to what competencies should be driving your business now. Now, if you go back to what Felicia said, I think this also aligns with the 9% respondent that we have from Chief Human Resource Officers that says that just 9% of them know what should be driving their business, the competence to be driving their business now and the future. So now the next session we're going to take would help in a way to be able to know what competencies should be driving your business. All right. So now the first step, based on our experience, is to review the business strategy. You have to look at the internal and the external realities. You can imagine an organization at the beginning of the year that had focused internally maybe on the resources that they have. Nobody thought about COVID-19, which came, and that's why it is also important to do some form of scenario planning. So having reviewed your business strategy, validated your internal and external realities, then you also now need to create some scenario planning, some form of what if predictive planning. All right, maybe for some of us, if we had sat down at the beginning of the year and asked questions like, what if we had a pandemic, that shut everything down, what would happen to my business strategy? Perhaps maybe we could have survived more than we are doing. Then in the course of doing your scenario planning, you also need to challenge all assumptions. You might make some assumptions when you are preparing your business strategy, but what if it changes? So what if you had made your plans on the exchange rates being 360 naira to a dollar, and now you have, I think it's about over 470. So what would happen? So in the course of asking such questions, challenging your assumptions, looking at what if we had planned that it will go this way and it doesn't, what can we do? So you would identify common themes across the different scenarios, okay? These themes could be things like, okay, you would need to be more agile. You will need to embrace automation. You will need your people to be more technologically oriented. You might need to review your processes, all right, to leverage more of technology. So by the time you look at all these common themes, then you can begin to derive your the competencies that should be driving your business both now and in the future from that. So the next step that you would also now need to do is to conduct some form of success profiling. Now, by doing a success profiling, you have to look at the your critical roles in the organization and ask yourself the question, so for each of these roles, what are those competencies, that are aligned to this role based on the themes that you have identified in your scenario planning? By asking questions like, if, for example, you take the role of your chief information officer or your chief technical officer, what should such individual be able to do? If you look at the business with respect to your scenarios, all right? What should they be able to do? If you take your human resource function, what should your HR director be able to do? And if you look at those other roles that you have in the organization that are critical to, then what should now be the ideal individual that should fill this role relative to the scenarios that you've come up with, for your business? And so when you now come up with the success profile, it becomes like the checklist for anyone that is going to be on that role. So you can now begin to look at your current CTO and ask yourself the questions, where are the gaps? All right. And that's where the next step, which is to carry out an audit. Okay, so for all your critical roles, you have to subject all the staff that are on those roles, to a competency audit and looking at those, the success profile that you came up with from your scenario planning. So with that, you will be able to see where the gaps are. You will be able to see what needs to be done. And that's where you can now put all your effort, all right, in building capacity in your organization. Okay, so at this point, yeah, we would
just to reinforce a bit of what Hakim has said before we bring in Nike. If we look at these steps now, we believe strongly that there shouldn't be development without assessment. One of the mistakes that we make as HR professionals is that we invest in development without being able to clearly identify what is needed. And assessment is, the starting point, for that. We also believe that HR practitioners should be more involved with corporate strategy and must understand the business better. If not, it becomes very difficult for us to provide the level of support because we're not connected enough to the business. Then, when it also comes to conducting the success profile, in certain instances, companies even identify what they call negative traits. If you look at the past to identify what are the things that have made this particular role fail. They can also identify and even check for that as well, so that they can address those failure behavior indicators as well, beyond just growing the positive ones. Because sometimes there are certain negative behaviors that people have that adversely affect their ability to function, either in the mindset, in the particular role, which are not necessarily skills. So you can also check for those as well based on historical results linked to that particular position or role. So, but what Akin has done is really to just show us the process and also um, let us see the usefulness of assessments to some degree to be able to either predict success for employees you want to bring in, or grow and increase success of employees you currently have within the organization, either their current roles or future roles you want them to perform in. It also becomes a tool to scale up very quickly when there has been a change in a business environment and our business needs to adapt to those changes. Thank you, Akin.
Okay, thank you, Felicia. Now we go to the next phase, and with this, we will be bringing in someone who has experienced this. So Nika will be speaking to us on the benefit of development center from the point of view of an individual who has gone through that, who has promoted that in an organization. And so over to you, Nika. I know that you're ready for us.
Thank you, Aki. Thanks, Felicia. It's been an interesting conversation here. And from my perspective, I will speak as someone that have participated in a development center, and also from the perspective of someone that have driven, a development center for an organization. To start with, understanding development center itself, a lot of time people do interchangeably use assessment center and development center. And actually, they are very similar, but the difference is what we use for the result, what we do with the result, what we use it for. So for assessment center is usually for selection, for judgment purposes, while for development center is actually to develop the skills, the capabilities, and the competencies of our people. And that is the difference between the two processes. However, from the development center, you can look at it from perspective, an employee, an organization. Okay, I'll start, because I can unfortunately be speaking a lot about organization and how intangible assets has actually helped organization. And that is true. Employees are simply seen today as learning customers from HR perspective. I'm a practitioner, and that is why, because you need to upskill your employee. Your human capital is the most important resource in every organization. And we can see that it's been proven with empirical studies, it's been proven with a lot of surveys. So therefore, if they are the most important to us, then developing their capability, the skills should be priority to every organization. So from the organizational perspective, when development center can actually create opportunities like it will enable you to understand the inventory of skills that you have in-house. What are the competencies that are available within my organization? And that helps you to bring you to the decision I call the 3B's decision. Is it to build? Is it to buy? Is it to borrow? Do I need to outsource a role? Do I need to bring in consultant to do this for me? How do I get required talent to actually fit in my short-term strategy or my long-term strategy? Then I may have to build. And in what quantity do I need this particular skill? Do I need this competency? For example, I'll talk about my organization. I think the main three things that we drive is agility. That's the bane of our strategy: agility, digitization, and specialization. And we have it built on what we call the heart sector, which is the health, education. We have transport sector, and we have agriculture. So based on this, how do you now ensure that the people are able to deliver on the strategy? Now linking, and that's what we're talking about, linking performance to competencies. We realize that these are the required competencies. We want our people, agility. Agility is part of culture. Development Center enables organization to be a learning organization, and that is culture. That means it's performance driven. People need to understand, because if you have to fail and fail fast in agility, and you have to have speed to things, then you must know what you're doing. You must, it will help to cut and reduce costs, even for the organization, because when you have competent employees, when you have employees that understand their roles in the organization and what needs to be done, then it helps you to cut down waste and time management. Also, some of the things is that you are able to align, you're going to be able to align the long-term decision, your long-term strategy to your skills, the skills that are required, and also to short-term strategy to the skills that are required in order to scale. Also, you are able to build succession planning. That's something that is important in leadership. In also your managers, how do you build them for succession? In development center, when proper profiling is done and skills are understood, the proficiency level of each of these individuals are understood, then one can deploy the necessary development tools. Now, to talk about people, in every employee life cycle, employees learn in different ways, and there are 4 approaches to that. We have what we call the intuitive approach. We have what we call the incidental approach. We have what we call the retrospective approach and the prospective approach. The intuitive approach is the natural field to learn. Every organization, some employees just want to learn. They have that personality, they have that drive to do self-learn, and but not every employee are like that. You also have employees that are learn by error, by something that must have happened in the organization, by learning on the job. So that's more that like incidental. So it's the learning is actually is driven by what you have actually experienced and what are the errors that you have committed. And also that this approach also works for organization, that because of something that has happened, you see a lot of organizations trying to train the employees around that same issue. Then you have what we call the retrospective approach, where you use your appraisals, you use your performance measuring tools, and you see what your employees do have, and you see how you can put that in place in terms of learning. Then you have but the prospective approach for me is broader, where you have a deliberate planned learning for your organization. And a lot of time you can take advantage of this through the development center, because at that time, there is what we call self-awareness. Employee must have self-knowledge. And how do I have self-knowledge if I do not have the opportunity to be exposed to my strengths and weaknesses? A lot of organizations, empirically, it's been found a lot of organizations that do manage training through the retrospective approach, through performance management. You realize that a lot of people then try not to showcase their weaknesses, and that can be limiting. I mean, when Aki and Felicia spoke, they spoke about a managerial function, opportunity to move to another role. And a lot of time you've been promoted based on what you do right now. But what are the consequences of the skills that is lacking in an employee to do another role which the employee is not ready for? So sometimes as an organization, if we're not deliberate about development and it's not structured, we sometimes promote a good employee talent to failure. And that's at the point when an employee now gets that was doing very well in the particular role, moves to a particular role, but without deliberate approach in building the skills and competence of that employee starts to experience what we call derailment. So these are some of the issues that an employee can face if development is not structured. And also from the employee perspective, when you are self-aware, there is a lot of organizations that take advantage of what we call the intelligent career, where an employee can actually chart their career. How will I chart my career if I do not know what it's required for the next role or for the next job opportunity? And this also helps to reduce strife in an organization, where employees are not just thinking about what is next for me, but what is next for me to give. In terms of learning and training, training is sometimes what organizations do, where we just deploy tools, we just deploy activity to an employee, where the employee is not ready to accept it, not knowing what the role that tool is going to impact on his business or on his competencies, on his skills. But when it's deliberate, this employee learns, and that's what it's called, the learning ability. You enhance the employee with the learning ability to develop him or ourselves in particular skills that is relevant to his or our success. Career is lifetime, so we can't just limit it to what we think we need now. So development center helps you to expatiate on your strengths, your weaknesses, your development gaps, how you collaborate, which is a very important skill nowadays. Even to scale, we can see it part of, because these are the very soft skills, the very intangible skills are what is required for today's success. Because if we want to think about critical thinking, which is part of what came up during the poll, it's all about you being able to collaborate. It's all about you being able to think out of the box, work with others to achieve particular results. So I think for me, the benefit of Development Center is enormous, and we may not be able to capture it all adequately, even during this interaction. And as someone that I've driven this and I've seen it, and I can tell you that there is a direct correlation between developing your employees' competence through a proper structured development center and organization performance. Thanks, Aki.
Thank you very much, Nike. Yeah, Felicia, do you want to speak to, you have anything to add to what Nike said?
Yes, I think clearly Nika is on point. This is something that she's done a few times for our organization. So we just put a few headlights from a provider's perspective, but we felt that it's also important to hear about this from a practitioner's perspective that has had that as a KPI item, that has had to sell it to management and has had to oversee the deployment of this. But clearly, it provides a more objective and a better way of developing employees. Employees also, then it also helps link employee development to corporate strategy. There's a lot of clarity in terms of this is where we're going, which Nika had highlighted. So she walked back from the strategy. These are strategy based on this. What must our guys be able to do? And clearly, they had a clear metrics to evaluate everybody's fit, what they call fit for the organization, and based on where the business was going, which many companies don't do. So they employ people from certain organizations that are still in line with the strategy and the culture there, and there's no clear way to realign them and evaluate them. Then of course, when you're transitioning people from one role to the other as well, it helps prepare them and almost increases their likelihood of success on the new role. So then it's also an objective measure. It's not just a line manager saying, Felicia doesn't do this or Nika doesn't do this. There's a process whereby you will take metrics, which is scientific. It makes it easier for the employee to accept it, and it also makes it easier for us to track impact at the end as well by still measuring the same things that we measured at the beginning. Clearly, as Nika said, there are a lot of benefits, either around technical or soft skills, or even addressing behavioral gaps, and which is why we strongly feel that this is something that more companies should be exploring as a way of developing employees, and also bridging succession planning gaps, where they can have a system to deliberately move people from certain roles to fill strategic roles and critical roles across the organization. So thank you very much, Aki.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Nika.
Yeah, Felicia, thanks. Nika, thank you very much. And I think one clear thing that jumped out from all you said is your closing statement where you said, you know, you were able, I mean, being a user or development center, you were able to establish the correlation, you know, between competence development using development center and also the business growth, which was where Felicia started from, trying to establish that connection between building the capacity of your employees and the survival and growth of your business. So Nika, thank you very much for sharing your practical insight. Okay, so before we go into question and answer, I mean, we can start to put in our questions now. Like I said earlier, we have an offer from Workforce to those of you that are on this webinar exclusively for you. And so after this, we will send you an email on how to access the offer. And so what is the offer? So in our last webinar where we talked about virtual assessment center, we did talk about some pitfalls that you should be careful of. And so we know that at this time, either for your assessment or development center, you need a platform. And so for the next 2 months, starting from now, we're making available our virtual assessment platform for your use at no cost, of course, for a maximum number of candidates. Okay, so in the email that you would get after this webinar, please get back to us if you would like to take up the offer. We would like you to indicate this as soon as possible, but you would have the opportunity to be able to use this within the next 2 months. All right, so let's move now to question and answers. We've activated that now. So please, if you have any question, type it or just raise up your hand and we would take it from there. Okay. All right, thank you. Someone just acknowledged the offer, said it's a great offer. Okay, thank you. So, yeah, someone is raising hand here. Awobusuyi Banji. Okay. So, Awobusuyi Banji, you have a question. Can you unmute from your hand and ask your question? Awobusuyi Banji.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Please go ahead.
I really want to appreciate this session, and I've really learned a lot. And my question is this: how can someone personally develop yourself more when you belong to an organization whereby they don't so much believe in development center and human capacity development?
Okay, thank you, Awobusuyi. All right, so the question is, how can you as an individual develop yourself if you are working in an organization where they don't appreciate capacity development? So I will let Nika take that question.
Thanks, Aki. I think I saw that comment. Hello, Awobusuyi.
Yeah.
And I do feel your pain. I know that this is something that's common with a lot of organizations. Yeah. Taking cognizance of the importance of building people capacity. But I will always say something that your career is actually in your hands and not the hands of your organization. I think you need to come up with what is called your personal training plan. You need to open yourself to feedbacks, and that will help you to build your own required competencies. You have to also look at taking courses in terms of learning competencies, and so that you will know what you require for today. If you have what we call job description in your organization, most job description do come with competencies guide and also proficiency guide. You could use that to chart yourself, where if you understand yourself, list out the competences that you think you require to optimize on your job, and also for your future challenge, your futuristic plan. You list it out, and then input the proficiency that is required for your futuristic plans. Then look at where you are today, and then also based on the understanding of yourself, and if you don't trust yourself enough that you can't assess it yourself, please, you can go online. There are very simple surveys that you can send to students. It will be able to chart your, you want a plan and a planning development plan. So just that you go for reading that. And training and development is deliberate. It actually yields more result, and it propels what career development. For me, I think I did this at a point in my career, and when I realized my organization was not, the organization I belonged to then, I worked with then, was not to focus on capacity development. I was able to talk to some people that I saw as mentors, and I was able to put together some required competence that I think I need. And that was what led me to actually have my master's in international human resource at the Cranfield University in the UK. And I think that has been a great turning point for my career. So I think you also need to be able to take such bold steps in order to personally develop yourself and not leave your career. You should not be at the mercy of the organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Nika. I just wanted to spend a minute to address that question. It's one that touches close to home. When you look at when you're looking at employee development, there are 3 responsibility lines, and we always take it for granted. Yes, the organization has a responsibility to develop employees. So sometimes you have to make a decision in terms of when you're joining an organization, is this one that is linked with development? And it's a question we never ask. We ask about salaries, but we never really go in and find out, I know people that take lower paid jobs because of developmental opportunities, and that shows that there is an inclination for that. 2, the next person is your line manager. Most of what you learn is on the job. So work with people that have something to teach you. You need, before you take the job, who am I reporting to? Who is going to be managing me on a day-to-day basis? And look at that person. Can I learn from this person? That also becomes an important decision-making that will impact your growth. And the third person is yourself. As Nika said, those 3 people will be responsible: your organization, your line manager, and yourself. And there's a lot of free resources now online, Udemy courses. They're always running discounts for as little as $10. So there is now a lot of online access to learning. So even if you don't have the budget, to a large budget, but so work with the right person, work with the right organization, and be deliberate about your own learning. Those will be the 3 things that I would say to add to what Nikki has said. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Nikki and Felicia. So I think the summary of the answer is the fact that it is your responsibility to develop yourself, and I think that's why they call it personal development. Okay, so I have 2 more questions. The next one, I would like Felicia to answer that, and it goes this: how can we manage employees who are deficient of necessary competencies for their position and they are not ready to learn or upskill?
Okay, this is an easy one for me to answer, maybe because I see things from a CEO perspective. I think that an employee is only as valuable as the value they can add to the company in the long run. Companies really employ people because they can add value to the organization. And if we really believe that there's a connection between employee capability and business performance, we know not afford to employ and keep people that are not growing. So one of the gaps we saw is that it puts pressure on other employees that can deliver, because it means that literally part of the workload they should be doing moves to someone else. So I think that this is an area that HR people must have the guts to have zero tolerance. Many people complain that companies don't offer the opportunity. When the company offers the opportunity and employees don't take it, it's something that you need to be very, very strong on them on. It's part of their job is not only what they do on a daily basis, but ensuring that they are capable of being able to add value at the required level for the organization. So I think it's something that becomes that should become an appraisal and even a job retention requirement for employees to have to grow and stretch for them to keep. If not, the company outgrows them and they become less relevant, and you will still have to let them go anyway. So enforcing it from the beginning might also be the best way to help them keep their jobs.
Thanks, Felicia. I just like to add to what Felicia just said, and I think it's some of the biggest challenges that organization and HR managers face when and sometimes I feel it's based on lack of self-knowledge. A lot of them do not even understand that they lack actually the skills, and they do not understand what is even, and sometimes they don't know what their role is and how their role is important to the achievement of the organizational goal. So they don't see themselves in the big picture. So there are two things: either that you get them to upskill or they get out. I mean, there's always a statement that he that cannot fire should not hire. When you have an employee that is obviously deficient and is aware, there's a level of awareness of this deficiency based on feedbacks. And have you had consistent feedbacks with this kind of employee? Is your performance management matrix and performance management system, does it give regular feedbacks to employee, or do we wait once in a year and to give such feedbacks? And also, are the leaders, managers, are they also fair enough to give reasonable and true feedbacks to employee? Because sometimes we just do paid audience and then we never give them the right information. So if these employees do have all this information and can see, obviously, see, what we don't know as managers and leaders is that there is a cost to every inefficient employee. There is actually a cost to inefficient employees, and there is also a cost that in the brand management of the organization, which is the bottom line. And these are the employees that automatically get into the group of what we refer as the disengaged employees. And believe me, they are actually detrimental to the growth of the organization, because if you have two employees and one is effective and the other is not effective, and nothing is done about the one that is not effective, there's a possibility that the effective one becomes ineffective. So you really have to be careful so this will not become a cultural issue. Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess that's the cost of, one of the costs of a bad hire. All right, so Nick, I hear you, and I think what you're saying is either you ship in or you ship out. All right, so we'll take one more questions because of our time, and we'll end this. And I think this has also been addressed by Nick already. And the question is, does a development center just assess the competency skill profile of the organization only, or combines this with appropriate learning interventions? Okay, so I mean, even from the name, development center is not just to assess, it's to ensure that whatever gaps are identified in the course of the assessment are closed. So yes, it goes with all the steps that are taken to ensure that the gaps are closed. All right. So thank you very much, everyone. A big thanks to all the panelists, especially Nike, for the time and the commitment that you have given, and also for sharing your insight on Development Center. And Felicia, thank you very much too for the support. And so please, if you have registered for the webinar, you would get an email from us, and from there, you will be able to access the offer that that we have given. Thank you once again. We would also let you know about the next webinar, and so that you can be part of us. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.